Well, I wonder, have you ever started a project thinking, you know what, this is going to be so great, so awesome, I'm going to knock this out, it's going to be great, only to end up in over your head? Am I the only person that's done that? No? You know, probably one of the bigger ones that I can think of, it dates back a few years. I was 15 and expecting to experience the freedom of owning my own car, you know, to be able to get in, go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted to go there. No mom and dad telling me what I could and couldn't do on the open road, wind flowing through the hair back when I had some, and just letting loose, right? So my first ever car, and you can probably remember this for yourself, mine was a 1984 Mercury Cougar.
Woohoo! Yeah.
And so this one was black, which, like, dude, it was awesome. Right, so my stepdad, he called me up, and he was at this auto auction. He's like, hey, they've got this 84 Cougar. It's only $300. You want it? Yeah, let's do this. Let's make it happen. Well, even then, $300 didn't get you a whole lot of car. And so when we got the car, there was a couple things that were going on. Number one, we didn't have keys. Okay, so we contact the locksmith. You know, we break into the car, we get some keys made for the car, and that's great, except for now we've determined that the car will not start. It's got cracked heads. You know how deflating that is for a 15-year-old thinking like, oh, dude, this is about to get real. And you just come like crashing down to earth. And even though like $300 like wasn't a lot of money to a 15-year-old kid at the time, like $300 was a lot of money. And so I did what most any 15-year-old kid would do. I wanted to fix the thing, right? Because I wanted to make this thing happen. And so I didn't know a lot about cars, but I knew some people who did. Well, at least the 15-year-old version of me thought that they did. And so I called up my friend and I'm like, hey, why don't you come over? We're going to tear into this motor and we're going to replace the heads. And he's like, okay. Well, I found out he's really good at tearing things apart, not so much about putting things back together again. And like we didn't think about labeling things, like categorizing them in certain bins or whatever. We just had like motor parts. And it was all over the place. Well, I never did get to drive the car. But I was able to sell it to some sucker for parts and get all my money back, which was great. But this was like a huge learning experience for me because I had in my mind like these big dreams. Like this car is going to change my life. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, change, right? Change is something that most of us were not receptive to, but kind of all of us long for it as long as it doesn't mess us up too much. Most of us are okay with the kind of change that we initiate, but not the kind of change that other people force on us. And so this car was one of those. It's like, this is my idea. This is going to be my ticket, right? My ticket to freedom, which we talked about last week. But there was something standing in the way. Like, obviously it didn't work, but I was not very smart in knowing how to fix this vehicle to make it run worthwhile. So week one, we talk about change. We're going through Core 52. If you haven't picked up one of these books, you can do so in the back. Mark Moore does a great job of just creating a 52-week kind of devotional content for us and giving us 52 key verses to kind of lock in on. And so for change, we're talking about Romans chapter 12, verse 2. I don't know if any of you guys are kind of devoting yourself to the Bible memory that's a part of this, but I would encourage you to do so. Therefore, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and you will be able to test and approve what God's will is for you, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I know that's ESV. I memorized it NIV a long time ago, and so you get what I know. And it's the same basic concept, right? We're not conforming, but we're transformed, and it starts with our mind. The change that needs to take place in our life starts with the way that we think, and we realize that change doesn't happen by chance, but it happens by choice. Most of us, like, we don't just wake up one day and go, oh, wow, hey, look, I'm fit. It just doesn't happen that way. Right? Oh, hey, look, I'm loaded. I got lots of cash now. No debt, believe it or not. Like, it just doesn't happen. Change takes choice. You create positive habits, but it starts first in our mind. And then freedom is this idea of just being set free by Jesus. Obviously, he took the weight of our sin. He took it to the cross, right, triumphing over it. But he also set us free with his truth that guides us each and every day into the right things that we ought to do. But one of the things, we talked about hurdles last week, one of the things that stands in our way are all these hurdles. And one of the biggest hurdles for you and I is that we have a hard time receiving the forgiveness of Christ. Like, he died, he's forgiven us, but we have a hard time forgiving ourselves. And so we talked about Romans chapter 8, verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation for those of us who are in Christ Jesus. Right? So there's no condemnation, but we have to internalize that bit of information. And I want to say it this way. If we really want to change, right, we have to renew our mind. And if we really want to experience freedom, we have to pursue truth. But we can't just have truth, like information. We also have to apply the truth, which actually leads to the transformation. Right? We apply the truth. And that's where we come into this week's topic of wisdom. Wisdom, as we see in Scripture, is this idea of applying God's truth into our life. Like, we actually use that bit of information. And I want to share with you guys, what I think are 4 problems that stand in the way of us seeking and applying the truth of God. Number 1 is this. We often seek counsel from people who reaffirm our beliefs or ideas. I think probably most of us are guilty of this. If you think a particular way about raising your kids and you want to know if you're doing it right, the easy thing to do is to go find other people who do it the exact same way so that they'll tell you, oh no, yeah, you're doing fine. Because most all of us, let's admit, like, we want other people to say, yeah, you're doing it right. We don't really want to hear somebody say, I'd probably do that a little different or a lot different, because you kind of stink at this. Right? If we're having struggles in our marriage, what oftentimes happens is we go find other people who would reaffirm our beliefs and our actions the way that we exist in interacting with our spouse, instead of finding somebody who's going to help us correct those behaviors. Right? It goes on and on into every area of life. It goes into our workplace. It goes into school. We just try to find those people who are going to affirm what we already believe. And we find those things on the internet too, don't we? Like, we go and Google things and like, hey, look, I found all this stuff that just reaffirms my exact position. See, I'm right. My guess is the internet's probably got some other stuff too. Right? We don't like to go to maybe some of those places, but real change will only happen, right, through the application of the truth. Through the application of the truth. Now, the challenge is that we live in a society that believes in no absolute truth. And so the way that we define truth isn't truth at all, because the truth is completely relative to me and my context. Right? So the way that I think, the way that I believe, the way that I act, like, that's truth to me. The things that I feel, the way that I was raised, the things that my parents did or didn't do, like, for me, that's absolute truth. But absolute truth is only found in Jesus. Right? He says, I am the way and the what? The truth. Right? You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But the truth that he's talking about is knowing Jesus. He is the Word. He is the truth. Right? In him we find life. But for so many of us, one of the biggest problems that we experience in pursuing wisdom is that we only go out and find the people who agree with us. And that's a big time challenge. Back in the day, like, if you wanted to get information on fixing your 84 Mercury Cougar with blown heads, you just had to go out and buy like an auto repair manual. You remember those things? Anybody ever have one? Like, they were thick like an encyclopedia, and you had to thumb through and find your stuff. Now, what do? We just flip to Google, YouTube. Hey, YouTube, how do you change this? Right? And we find a video. And the video, hey, that's an 83 Cougar, but I think I can figure it out. Right? We can make this thing happen. Anybody here ever fix anything with a YouTube video? Right? If you haven't done that, you're missing out. Right? This is a great source of information. But another great source is God's Word itself. Our key verse for this week is Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. It's in page 527 in the Bibles we provide if you want to follow along there. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Yeah, have you ever received good advice and not taken it? I have. And according to this passage, like, I'm a fool. Yeah, tell me something I didn't know. Right? There are aspects of my life that, like, dude, absolutely, point blank, that's me. I'm an idiot. I haven't figured it out. The information was there and I didn't do it. I did what I wanted to do anyway. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fear is this word, when we see it in this context, it has a lot to do with respect. So if we respect the source of the information, then we will apply the information into our life. And the problem in this situation is that so many times we don't fear God enough to actually apply the things that He's telling us. We fear things like rejection of other people. We fear things like not fitting in. Right? And so our fear of man or our fear of change is actually driving us to rebel against the truth of God, the wisdom that sets us free. And so there's another problem that exists. The first one is we find people who affirm our beliefs, but the second problem is that we oftentimes take our struggles to Google instead of to God. Think about this for a moment. We live in an era of information. There's no need to go out and get the Chilton's Auto Manual. Right? You can go to YouTube. You don't have to go to Encyclopedia Britannica. Some of you don't even know what that is. Right? That's like Wikipedia back in the day. Right? And so you would go to the encyclopedia. You don't even have to go to the library to get information. Like, this was not a thing back in my time, like growing up. Matter of fact, one of my favorite things today is audiobooks that I can download online. I don't have to read a book. Right? Where was this in college? That would have been fantastic. Right? We have information at our fingertips. Everything from recipes. Anybody ever just Google a recipe and then have their device right there while they're cooking? Right? Absolutely. We get a health problem, right, that's going on. Instead of going to the doctor, which we know is going to cost us money, what do? WebMD, hook me up. What do you have to say about this? And so we go online and we try to find that. And if we want to repair our 84 Cougar, guess what? YouTube, hook me up, baby. Let's see what this has got. And so we dig into all these online resources, and maybe you've seen this before. This is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I found it online. Don't believe everything that you see on the internet. Right? Have you seen this one before? Let it sink in a bit. Yeah, some of you are getting it. Yeah. So like Abraham Lincoln, he was a good guy, no internet. Right? Don't believe everything you see on the internet. But we do! Right? Because we're a bunch of fools. Look at this. A fool despises wisdom and instruction, so we ignore the truth of God, and we go after the truth of Google. Hey, Google, hook me up. How many of us have those little discs in our house? Hey, Google. We flip them on our phone. Hey, Google. Hey, Siri. You know, what's happening? And so we have a tendency in our struggles to pursue Google before we pursue God. And I don't think I'm probably the only one that's guilty. Right? Because I have a tendency to try to fix it myself. And I have a tendency to try to do it in the easiest way possible. And so somebody out there surely has got a fix. Proverbs goes on to say in chapter 3, verses 5 through 8. This is on page 528 in the Bibles we provide. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Lean not on your own understanding. Guys, this is, if I'm going to be quite honest, one of the biggest struggles I have. Is that I don't know a lot, but I think I know a lot. And so it prevents me from asking for help because I can do it. I can fix it. I know how to make this happen. Anybody else have all the answers? Yeah. It's a struggle, right? The struggle's real, that we sometimes become our own advisor. And it says, lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways, acknowledge the Lord. Why? Because He's the one that makes our path straight. If we really want to experience change, if we really want to experience the freedom that comes from that change, it's in pursuing the wisdom of God, and He's the one that clears the hurdles and makes our paths straight again. Here's problem number 3, and it leans heavily on this one. We don't ask for help. We don't ask for help. We get ourselves into a bind, and we think, you know what? I'll just figure it out on my own. We get ourselves into a bind, and we think, well, it's all over now. Like, I'll just deal with it. Whatever. Like, I'm moving on to the next thing. I'm just going to ignore this thing, and I'm going to go the other direction. I'm just going to, throw my tools down and walk away. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to seek extra wisdom. Like, I got my car, the hood is up, the motor's in pieces, I don't know what to do, I'm not going to ask for help. Right? Our life, right? Hood's up, things not ticking right, and we just keep clicking. And there we are, pulling up Google. Google, how do I fix this? How do I find happiness? How do I find contentment? Google, what's the next big thing? We look out into society, and we go, what's making other people happy? Well, other people are really good about wearing masks, just like you and I are. And so we think that they're happy. We think that they're content. And on the outside, it appears that way. But on the inside, they're just as hollow as we are. And so we're trying to find all of these other answers, the easy answers. Well, the answer is right in front of us. You shall know the truth. The truth will set you free. Lean not on your own understanding, but trust God, right? Lean on His understanding. He will make your paths straight. But we don't seek God first. My first response is always, fix it myself. My second response is this, to withdraw. My second response is to withdraw. I've said for, probably at least a couple months, I do a really good job of owning my stuff when it's a problem I've already faced and already conquered. I do a really horrible job of confessing my stuff that I'm currently going through. So there's 2 things I think that stand in my way. Right? 2 hurdles, if you will, to me seeking the right wisdom. And one is pride, and the other is insecurity. And I think that they're like 2 sides of the same coin. Right? Because I have a lot of pride in the things that I do, and the things that I do, I think that I do pretty good at them. Ask me, I'll tell you. Right? And there's this pride about what I'm doing. And on the other side of that, there's this horrible insecurity. Right? That if somebody pulls out the rug and shows me that what I'm doing is incorrect, it's like a knife to the heart. Oh, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Oh, I can't accomplish what I thought I could accomplish. Right? One of the things that I would say about myself is like I'm not an extrovert, but I don't really feel like I'm an introvert anymore either. But one of the things I think that draws me to the introverted side of things, insecurity. Right? I'm afraid of what other people might think or what they might say. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of rejection. I don't want what other people say to determine my value, but so many times for me, yes, as your pastor, like I give other people the opportunity to define me and to ascribe my value. Too many times I allow my achievements to define how good I am, how great I am, how much I'm loved. Right? And so this last year, it was a hard year, like for connection. And I know that for a lot of things, like, I just try to get to work. Like, let's go fix it. Let's go make things happen. And guess what? You can't always fix everything. And so what's my second tendency? Right? I'm just going to withdraw. When you withdraw, guess what you're not doing? You're not asking for help. You're not asking for help. And so when we had some families go through some difficult times and they decided that the connection was no longer their home, guess what the easy thing is to do for me? Like, Guess I'm not good enough. Guess I'm not the friend that I thought I was. Right? And so it's so easy to kind of internalize some of those things. It's so easy to get frustrated when somebody leaves and goes a different direction. It's so hard when you understand that the people are going through these challenges, and as much as those challenges are their challenges, it's their life, it's their choices, right? That you're back here playing kind of the fall guy. Because guess what? My value, instead of being found in God, is found in my achievement. And a church that after Easter, like we were pushing 170, 180 on a regular basis, and then summer hit, and some people left, and we transitioned to this space, and we didn't have the money to go to the next space yet. And so all of that stuff, it's like, gosh, how am I going to lead when I feel like such a failure? And I wonder, I say this not for me, but for all of us. I wonder how many of us, we battle some of those same hurdles. Maybe for you it's pride and insecurity. Right? That keep you from seeking the kind of counsel that you and I need. It's the kind of insecurity that sends us to Google, that safe place that we can search in the dark, as opposed to seeking somebody else who's going to know our stuff. Because they might judge us. They might laugh at us. Or they might actually love us. They might actually encourage us. But it's not very easy to receive when we withdraw. And that's just my struggle. Right? So what keeps you from asking God for help? James chapter 1, verse 5, page 1011. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. If any of you lacks wisdom. I'm going to do kind of a straw poll here. You don't have to participate if you don't want to, but here's the basic question. Do you ever lack wisdom? Gosh, yeah. Right? If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. I know this to the core of my being, and I still withdraw. I know this to the core of my being, but whenever I get into a difficult time and I wear a bracelet on my wrist that says pray first, I don't. Right? Because I get consumed by the stuff instead of chasing wisdom. And the truth will set you free. Why? I'm just asking this question. I don't know the answer. Why is it so hard to pursue the right answer when you know it? It's just right there. And I go back to Proverbs 1:7. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be wrong. I just want to dwell in my misery for a bit. I just want to try to fix it myself. I don't want anybody else to know. So problem number one, we oftentimes seek counsel from people who just affirm what we already believe. Problem number two is we often take it to Google before we take it to God. Problem number three is we don't even ask for help. And problem number four is this: we don't apply the truth that we know. Gosh, how many times, God has just got to be shaking his head like, dude, I gave you the answer. Gave you the answer. And instead of looking for the answer, I look elsewhere. And there's so many times as a pastor in particular, but as a believer in all of us, right, that we know the answer. The answer's not the hard part. The application is the hard part. And we don't actually want to do what God has asked us to do. I was visiting with somebody here recently, and we were going through this kind of discussion, like, okay, here's the problem, or here are the problems, and here are some of the challenges. And so here are the solutions. Guess what? The solutions require me to change, requires me to humble myself and seek wisdom from somewhere else. And so when I don't do the things that I ought to do and get the results that I crave, it's oftentimes me who's the problem. That was a really good answer, by the way. I think it was BJ that threw that on our online question. Like, what's one of the hurdles that stands between who you are and who God wants you to be? Me. Me. Right? The way that I think, my own pride, my own insecurity, my lack of being able to forgive myself and to move on, my lack of desire to pursue knowledge and truth and to actually apply that truth in my life. So we fail to apply the things that we know. We already said, like, this world is so full of knowledge. Right? You don't have to leave your house. You could sit in a 6x6 room with your smartphone, as long as there's Wi-Fi nearby or a cellular tower, and pursue all sorts of knowledge. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about an absolute truth that's found in Jesus. And that absolute truth will set you free, but only if you and I apply the truth. Application of information is ultimately, it's anchored in our amount of respect, fear God, right? Our amount of respect for the giver of that truth. Do you fear the Lord? Well, let's take a look at this. James chapter 1, verse 22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Right? If any of you lacks wisdom, ask God. He's willing to give it. But be doers of the word and not just hearers only, because you and I, in that, we deceive ourselves. And let's be real. I don't know your life. I don't know where you're from, but I guarantee you we have people in this room that we claim the banner of Christ. We say that we're a Christian. We wear the right jewelry and t-shirts and have the right bumper stickers. Right? We have the right go-to answers when we're in a Christian environment. But the reality is that you and I are not doers of the word. And maybe it's simply because we don't apply what we know. And so do you want to seek wisdom? Do you want to experience freedom? Do you want the kind of freedom that only the change in God is going to provide? It starts with the way that we think. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so we open up the Word of God and we read it. We take it in, but we also live it out. Guys, that's wisdom. And so I'm going to ask you what your next step is. And this is how I want to do that. Biblical wisdom is always expressed. It's manifest through action. James is a book that's high on action. Show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by what I do. So what wise action do you need to take today? What application of God's truth, you already know it, right, do you need to take? What step do you need to take in searching the truth from the right source in God? Right? Where are you going to take this? In your marriage? In your dating circle? With your peer group? With your kids or with your parents? Where do you need to apply God's truth in your life? If you can answer that, then you've just given yourself a next step.